Number 10. The growing doll. Let's kick off this list with one that definitely terrifies me the most. If you think dolls are creepy, then just wait until I tell you about this one. In 1918, a man in Japan purchased a seemingly normal doll for his sister. Unfortunately, the sister passed away soon after, so the family created a shrine in her memory and placed the doll within it. As time passed, however, they noticed something incredibly unsettling about the doll. It was growing hair. That's right, the hair on the doll was getting longer and longer as more time passed. Because of this, they believed that the doll had become possessed with the restless spirit of the little girl. As a result, they entrusted it to the care of a temple where it still remains to this day, growing more hair. You are able to go to the temple and visit the doll, but photography is strictly prohibited. The priests at the temple say that the doll's hair has now grown down past its knees, and they say that her mouth is opening, slowly growing human teeth. Number 9. Sea monster. In 2018, tourists on a beach in Vietnam were shocked by an apparent sea monster that had washed up on shore. One person filming it and uploading it to YouTube for more people to see. The creature is incredibly strange looking, and to me it looks like a bundle of like alien twigs or something. The tour guide themselves admitted that they had no idea if it was an animal, a plant, or even something alien. A lot of commenters believed that this was some sort of mysterious alien creature found on Earth, as no one had ever seen anything like it before. Many people speculating that it might be only in its early stages of development and could grow into something bigger and scarier. As it turns out, it's apparently just some sort of scary deep sea starfish, and they ended up returning it to the water. And I will honestly never get over how terrifying and alien looking some deep sea creatures are. Number 8. Seven Sisters Rock. This one is another one that comes from Hong Kong, and it's the story behind the Seven Sisters Road. The story goes that there was a group of 7 women who lived near the area, and together they took a vow of celibacy, which means never getting married or ever being physically intimate with someone. Through their pact, they became blood sisters. However, the third sister's family refused to go along with this and organized for her to be married off, preparing the ceremony. Because of their pact, the night before the wedding ceremony took place, all 7 women drowned themselves in the river. The villagers in the area were never able to find their bodies, but the next time the tide receded, they discovered 7 large boulders all in a row. As a result, they were named the Seven Sisters Rocks. Years later, a swimming space was built called the Seven Sisters Swimming Shed, but any late night male swimmers there would end up drowning mysteriously, the 7 sisters reportedly haunting the space. Number 7. Haunted Tomb. Before I start this one, I am just gonna say yes, Israel is in Asia, and yes, I did have to Google that. Go easy on me, it's been a while since I last took a geography class. A group of researchers were doing excavations in an old cemetery in Israel when they discovered an ancient tomb. What shocked them the most, however, was the grave marker for a man named Jacob the Convert, who died around 1800 years ago. The inscription on the grave was written in human blood, and was a warning that nobody should ever open the tomb, stating that anyone who does so would be cursed. What type of curse isn't detailed, but curses are typically never a good thing. The people who found it walled off the area with stones and halted their excavations. Getting cursed probably wasn't in their contract. Number 6. Cursed balls. More cursed things from Israel. Let's take a look at this pair of cursed balls. And yes, I did pick this one because I think it's funny to say cursed balls. During excavation near the Israel border, archaeologists discovered these 2 ballista balls, which were basically ammunition for a big crossbow that fires rocks. A few years later, the balls went missing from the site, but unfortunately nobody actually noticed. 20 years later, the balls were returned and found on the site once again, along with a note. The thief who stole them apparently had bad luck and believed that the balls were cursed. He said that when he brought the balls home, his successful business suddenly failed, his family abandoned him, he went into severe debt, and apparently many other issues. He didn't realize until it was too late that his bad luck was caused by a bunch of bad balls. So he returned the balls to the site, and we can only assume that his bad luck ended. Number 5. GONJIAM ASYLUM. Now let's swerve into a few buildings that were discovered to be apparently haunted. The first is GONJIAM Psychiatric Hospital in South Korea, touted as the most haunted place in the country. It was opened in 1982 but closed only 14 years later in 1996, being left empty and abandoned. The story goes that many of the patients at the hospital were disappearing mysteriously, people believing that the owner of the hospital was actually keeping them hostage there and treating them poorly, running away to America when the families and authorities started looking into it. The doctors there apparently became just as insane as the patients, and due to their tragic deaths and unfinished business, the angry spirits of the doctors and patients now haunt the broken down facility. Many urban explorers and ghost hunters report large amounts of paranormal activity and seeing apparitions of the patients within the halls. Number 4. Prince Gong's Mansion. Over in China, one of their most haunted locations is Prince Gong's Mansion, owned by an official of the Qing dynasty who was known to be incredibly corrupt. He lived there with his wife and his harem of around 80 ladies. One of his only redeeming factors was said to be his devotion to his wife. When she became incredibly sick after their son passed away, he did everything to try and figure out a way to cure her, including hiring monks to pray for her health. Unfortunately, they apparently discovered that she was dying of a broken heart, and this was unable to be cured by any method. So unfortunately, the woman would soon pass away. The mansion is now said to be haunted by her spirit, as well as other women that the prince was involved with. Most of the reports say that you can hear his wife crying late at night, and security guards have reported seeing apparitions of women in white dresses wandering through the halls. Number 3. Soccer team. This one was probably one of the most talked about news stories at the time, even worldwide, and you'll probably remember it once I start talking about it. Back in 2018, a group of British divers were in northern Thailand when they discovered an entire soccer team flooded and trapped over 2 miles inside of a cave. The soccer team had been led to the cave by their coach, who had visited there before. It was supposed to be only a quick expedition lasting around 2 hours, so they brought only flashlights, rope, and batteries, not any food or water. But when a monsoon hit, they became trapped inside, and 2 hours turned into 2 weeks, surviving off water dripping from a stalactite and chanting mantras in order to stay calm. Fortunately, all 12 players were rescued over the course of 3 days and survived, only one rescue team member losing their life in the effort. Number 2. Airplane Graveyard. One place to visit in Thailand that many people probably don't know about is this airplane graveyard. Starting in January of 2010, large scrapped airplanes just suddenly started showing up on a chunk of private property next to an auto body shop in Bangkok. In 5 years, many large planes were added to the graveyard, and soon after, it was discovered that 3 separate families had taken up residence within the planes. The planes are clearly broken down and have been stripped for their parts, making the site look like the eerie location of like a giant multiple plane crash. The families that live there use the planes as a source of income, taking the parts to be sold and making money off tourists who come to visit. Some of the planes include 2 Boeing 747s and 2 MD-82 jetliners. Gaining access to the property will run you around $5, so if you're in Thailand and interested in planes, maybe consider checking it out. Number 1. Hybrid Creature. And we are continuing to stay in Thailand for this final entry on the list, which is a strange creature found in a remote village that had people absolutely baffled. Footage of the creature shows it laid out on a table surrounded by people. It appears to be a young buffalo, but it has the skin and scales of a crocodile. Many people believing that a crocodile and buffalo somehow fell in love and created this hybrid creature, which died shortly after it was born, which is a pretty common occurrence for hybrid animals. The buffalo had previously birthed plenty of normal calves before, so they didn't think it could have been just some passed down genetic trait, truly believing it must be mixed with a crocodile. The villagers had it laid out on the table because they believed that the creature would bring them good luck. Whether or not it actually did, I'm not sure, and other people online believe that the whole thing was just a hoax. Number 10. Dragon of Death. We all know that millions of years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth before they became extinct. Scientists are constantly working to put together the fossils and remains that they have found and discover new species. One of the ones that was discovered recently has been described as the Dragon of Death. It was a flying reptile like a pterodactyl that is described as having been the size of a bus. Fully extended, its wings measured 30 feet from one tip to the other, and they were apparently as tall as giraffes. The leader on the project said that its size defies the limits of our biological understanding. The remains were discovered in the mountains of Argentina, and the specimen is apparently around 86 million years old, being preserved within the rocks. It's incredible to think of the sheer size of some species of dinosaurs and to imagine them compared to ourselves. With all the talk of scientists wanting to bring certain animal species back from extinction, it may not be long until we have a real-life Jurassic Park. Number 9. Inunaki Tunnel. Deep within the mountains of Fukuoka, Japan, you will find the Inunaki Tunnel, home to a dark and troubled history. In 1988, the remains of a young man were found within the tunnel, having been killed by a group of teenage boys. It has also historically been a training ground for Buddhist practitioners who say that the tunnel is a spiritual hotspot for lost souls. As a result, the tunnel has been sealed off with concrete blocks, but there is an opening at the top where anyone who's foolish enough can climb up and sneak inside. People who have gone inside have reported the feeling of being watched by a malicious energy, with reports of camera malfunctions, paranormal activity, and unidentifiable noises taking place within the tunnel. Some people say that they can hear the cries of the man who died within, his spirit potentially haunting the now abandoned place. Number 8. Buddha Statue. In 2014, an ancient golden Buddha statue was examined, and researchers discovered a horrifying secret hidden within. X-rays showed the body of a real monk that had been mummified within the statue, sitting in the exact same position. Researchers believe that the man had taken part in a process known as self-mummification. Centuries ago, this was a common practice for Buddhist monks across Asia. To avoid fat and moisture causing their bodies to decay after they died, they would eat little to nothing in the time leading up to the end of their lives, eating things like pine needles, tree bark, and sesame seeds. This process would last for years as they got older, and they would then ingest a poisonous sap to finally end their lives. Researchers believe that the man inside the statue was a Buddhist monk who died around the year 1100. What was most unsettling though was that the man's body was basically hollow, containing papers covered in messages instead of his organs. Number 7. Kappa remains. The Kappa is a cryptid that is native to Japan. For anyone who doesn't know, a cryptid is described as an animal whose existence or survival to the present day is disputed or unsubstantiated. Some famous cryptids include Bigfoot, Mothman, and the Loch Ness Monster. A Kappa is a water creature that is described as being green, having a scaly skin and webbed feet, long elastic arms, and looking humanoid. They are said to lure people to pools of water where they then drown them. If you're looking to avoid being drowned, then it is recommended to carve your name and birth date on a cucumber and feed it to a Kappa, because then they'll apparently leave you alone forever. In May of 2014, the remains of an actual Kappa were supposedly discovered and then put on display. They were apparently from a Kappa that was killed all the way back in the year 1818. It doesn't seem to have been confirmed what the remains are, so could this be actual evidence of cryptids being real? Number 6. Goddess of Death. If you're a fan of cursed objects, then let me introduce you to this statue titled the Woman of Lem, also known as the Goddess of Death statue. It is crafted out of limestone around 3500 BC and was discovered in Cyprus in 1878. I know what you're thinking, isn't Cyprus a part of Europe and not Asia? Well, actually, while the country of Cyprus is culturally and politically a part of Europe, it is geographically in Asia and considered transcontinental. So it counts. And if you think it doesn't count, you can take it to the complaints department. Alright, back to why this statue is cursed. Every single family that it has belonged to over the generations has died. The first family to own it had 6 members, all of whom died within 7 years of coming into ownership. The second owner's family died after only 4 years. The third third family to own it also started passing away, but the 2 remaining members seemed to realize what was happening and donated it to the Royal Scottish Museum. Number 5. King Tut's trumpets. Let's take a look at some more cursed objects, this time from King Tut's tomb in Egypt. In 1922, a group of archaeologists entered King Tut's tomb and found many interesting objects, including a set of wooden, silver, and bronze trumpets. In 1939, BBC Radio recorded the sound of the trumpets so that people could hear the ancient instruments being played. A few months later, World War II began, and a legend started that the trumpets were capable of summoning wars. Egyptian trumpets have apparently often been used on the battlefield for alerting and directing soldiers, so the legend isn't completely unfounded. And there are Egyptian archaeologists that believe trumpets have mystical powers in relation to war. In 2011, an anonymous staff member had been photographing and documenting the trumpets and decided to play one of them. The Egyptian Revolution then taking place later that year. Number 4. KAALA BANDAR. Now let's travel to New Delhi, India for another apparent discovery of a real-life cryptid, this time one known as a KAALA BANDAR. In May of 2001, one of these creatures was apparently terrorizing New Delhi. They're described as being around 5 feet tall with thick black hair all over their body and glowing red eyes. It was also described as wearing a metal helmet and having metal claws. All over the city, reports started flooding in of attacks from the so-called monkey man, and citizens were terrified. A total of 3 people actually died as a result, from a woman falling down a staircase to 2 men who were cornered by the creature and fell from a building. Many reports came in of bites and scratches that had come from the creature, and people in the town were scared of even going outside, armed men guarding the neighborhoods at night. Eventually, sightings stopped coming in and the town was able to relax. Number 3. The Terracotta Army. In China in 1974, a group of farmers made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever. They were digging a well when they found what they thought was a statue of Buddha. In fact, it was the famous Terracotta Army. The army consists of over 8,000 foot soldiers, chariots, and horses, which were buried along the first Chinese emperor back in the year 210 BC. They were built to commemorate his massive empire. As it turns out, the Terracotta Army may be cursed, the farmers believing that any disruption to the army would bring misfortune, and as time went on, this seemed to be true. The farmers and land were taken over by the government, business officials, and third-party groups who wanted to take advantage of and profit off the army. The farmland was demolished and replaced with gift shops and attractions. The original farmers have passed away except for 2 who now work in the same shops that took over their land, signing autographs for a mere $2 a day. Number 2. Lady Di. When we think of well-preserved specimens, we often think of creatures that were held in ice before being discovered thousands of years later, often still having hair, skin, and even blood in their veins. So now let me tell you about Lady Di, a human woman who was kept perfectly preserved inside an airtight tomb for 2,000 years. Researchers discovered the tomb of the woman in 1971, the wife of an important Han Dynasty administrator who passed away in 163 BC and received the burial of a royal. She was placed in a crypt with over 1,000 luxurious items like makeup and 162 statues who would be her servants in the afterlife. Thanks to the seal of the tomb, when she was found 2,000 years later, she was still in incredible condition. She had soft skin and hair and even eyebrows and eyelashes, and they were even able to find her last meal, which was melon, and the cause of her death, which had been a heart attack. Unfortunately, since she was discovered, her body has now started to decay, and only pictures can show what she used to look like. Number 1. The Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond was first discovered in a mine in India, triangular in shape and being described as a beautiful violet color. It was then placed in a statue from which it was apparently later stolen, the thief suffering from an extremely unfortunate death. Since then, it has been said that the Hope Diamond is cursed, anyone who has owned it or even merely touched it having a similar fate. Some owners include Jacques Collet, who took his own life, Princess de Lamballe, who was killed in the French Revolution, and Jean Le Tavernier, who was killed by a pack of wild dogs. The diamond finally came into ownership of Harry Winston, who made the wise choice of donating it to the Smithsonian in 1958, where it remains to this day. There are many more tales of owners who were apparently apparently cursed by the diamond, so feel free to look it up if you're interested. Since the diamond made its home in the Smithsonian, the curse has supposedly ended, and there have been no more reported victims of the jewel. Number 10. Haunted takeaway. This story comes from a cafe in Hong Kong that did a lot of delivery orders to customers' homes. One day they received an order for 4 meals and they brought it to the address they were given. The customer only opened the door a crack, sliding the money through and telling them to leave the food on the floor. When they checked the register that night, they discovered the money they were given had turned into hell money, which locals use to burn for use in the afterlife. This happened a few more days in a row, every time going to the same home and the money turning into hell money. Each time the customer would never fully open the door or reveal themselves. Finally, the owner decided to report it to the police, and when they entered the apartment they discovered that the residents weren't actually alive, instead finding 4 dead bodies on the floor. They were able to tell that the bodies had been dead for a significant amount of time, but still had food in their stomachs from the cafe that was only recently digested. Number 9. Haunted idols. Burial sites often fall victim to grave robberies, things being stolen from the dead and defenseless. In May of this year, a group stole 16 statues from a 300-year-old temple, but what they stole caused them to regret their decision. After less than a week, 14 of the 16 stolen statues reappeared on the doorstep of the temple's chief priest, returned in fine condition. The thieves left a letter of confession for stealing the statues and said that they were returning them because they felt they had become cursed by the idols. The note said, "We have not been able to sleep, eat, and live peacefully. We are fed up with the scary dreams and are returning your valuables." Having the idols around seemed to put a haunted curse on the thieves, though we can only guess whether the statues were totally haunted or were simply punishing the thieves for their actions. Reportedly, cursed objects are nothing new and pop up all over the place, so it's probably best if you just keep your hands to yourself. Number 8. Skeleton. When people pass away, they are often remembered fondly by their family and descendants, arranging the funeral and getting their affairs in order. So what happens when no one is around to even know that someone has passed away? When they have no close family or friends who will notice that they've stopped answering their messages? Well, early this year, a team of construction workers in New York spotted something strange through a window. They saw what they believed to be a human skeleton, and it turns out that it was. It was a 54-year-old woman who had been living in the apartment when she died of currently undetermined causes. The woman's sisters had tried to come into contact with her, but had only filled out a missing persons report, not knowing that she was still inside her home. It's believed by doctors that the woman had been dead for almost 2 years before being discovered, her body decomposing inside the home. Number 7. Sea creature. With around 80% of the ocean still unexplored, we can only leave it up to our imaginations to wonder what sort of creatures might be living in the deep dark depths. Even the sea creatures that we are aware of and have studied are pretty freaky to look at sometimes. Every so often, a fisherman or other explorer will pull up something totally strange, and this happened earlier this year. A fisherman posted a picture to Instagram of a bizarre alien-looking fish that he had pulled up on his line. The post went viral, the fish being swollen and pink with large green eyes, torn fins, and strange markings that made it look like it had received surgery. The ocean seems to be full of terrifying creatures that we really can't explain, and I personally live in fear of the day when they all decide to come up to the surface and grow legs. Number 6. Dead woman's ditch. In February of this year, numerous reports started coming in of a ghost that could be found at a place called Dead Woman's Ditch. The ditch is in Somerset in the United Kingdom and is named after a woman that was killed by her husband after he discovered that she had fallen pregnant from his brother. People say that the area is now potentially haunted by her spirit, being a type of ghost that is known as a woman in white. Apparently, this particular ghost is not very polite and has been reported to swear at people walking by, telling them to F off. Reports have started ramping up this year, which prompted a ghost investigation crew to look into the claims. People say that they don't just hear her voice, but have also seen an apparition of the woman alongside the road, usually described as wearing long white clothing. But when they turn their heads to get a second look, she's gone, leaving behind only her crude warnings. Number 5. Robot consciousness. One fear that many people share is that of technology taking over the world. There are many sci-fi futuristic movies that depict the idea of robots rising up against their masters and taking over the human race. With technology becoming more advanced at an exponential rate, it may not be long before this fantasy becomes a reality. Many researchers have been putting work into creating AI, or artificial intelligence, that can think and hold conversations on their own. One main example being Sophia the robot, who you may know from her appearances on talk shows, able to come up with conversational responses all on her own. This year, a group of Colombian engineers created a robot that was able to imagine itself and what it looked like, the robot having its own idea of self-image. They placed it in a room surrounded by cameras, and they watched as the robot explored its own body and how it moved. It created a self-model of itself, which it used to plan courses, complete tasks, and get around obstacles. Now that they can create an idea of their own bodies, it might not be long before they create their own personalities and morals. Number 4. Hammerhead worm. You may be familiar with this one thanks to the rounds it made on TikTok. This species of worm started popping up more frequently in the United States this year, and nobody really knows how it managed to make its way from Asia. These hammerhead worms, named so for their physical appearance, can grow up to 15 inches long and are honestly pretty disgusting to look at. They are known for their way of killing, which is by secreting a sticky and deadly neurotoxin which incapacitates and then liquefies their prey. The main issue is that they're taking over local earthworm populations and damaging the ecosystem, and they're pretty damn hard to kill. If you cut one in half, it will simply become 2 separate worms. This is through a process called fragmentation. In order to kill them, you either need to dry them out with salt or stick them in your freezer for about 48 hours. Though I personally don't think I could ever get close enough to one to do either of those things. Number 3. Pollution. Okay, this one isn't a ghost story or some mysterious creature, but it's still pretty damn scary and something that I think we all should be aware of. According to a global report released in May, it revealed that 9 million people died prematurely in 2019 as a result of pollution. This is caused by breathing the dirty air, which slowly leads to heart disease, respiratory problems, and other serious illnesses which ended up being fatal. The Lancet Commission of Pollution and Health said the following: "The threat of pollution is much greater than that of war, terrorism, malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, drugs, and alcohol. It is an existential threat to human health and planetary health and jeopardizes the sustainability of modern societies." While awareness towards global warming has been rising in recent years, it seems to some like we may be beyond the point of no return. The discovery that pollution is having such an impact on our health is certainly a frightening one. Number 2. Pentagon report. Alright, now I'm excited because I finally got to the part of this list where I get to talk about aliens. If you've watched some of my other videos on extraterrestrials, then you may be familiar with the hundreds of pages of reports that were declassified by the Pentagon. These reports all being about UFOs and extraterrestrials. Well, early this year, they released documents that shared some pretty startling information. Some of the documents included information about physical effects that people have had from coming into contact with UFOs or anomalous vehicles. They included things like radiation burns, brain damage, nervous system damage, and even unexplained pregnancies. There were around 42 medical cases and 300 unpublished cases that were all in relation to physical effects sustained by people who had said they witnessed UFOs and extraterrestrial life. It's pretty shocking that the Pentagon had been trying to cover this up and sweep it under the rug, obviously not wanting people to know the truth about what's out there. Number 1. Russian spy. A young man from Mexico came to the United States where he became a prominent scientist and researcher, having many accolades. What people didn't know was that he was actually leading a double life as a Russian spy. He met a man on a trip to Russia who knew that Hector Cabrera had been looking for property in Miami, and he said that they could help each other out. The Russian was working for the government, and with his help, Hector got an apartment under a fake name, being in the same Miami building that a United States informant was living in. He was then tasked with tailing the informant and bringing back any information he found to Russia. During the time, he had 2 wives and families, one in Russia and one in Mexico, and he balanced them both pretty very delicately. However, he was caught doing his spy work on surveillance footage and subsequently arrested, and his activities were found out this year. He was arrested, but it makes you wonder just how many people you see on the street who might secretly be living double lives.